Hey everyone, Brett from Kitchen Table Commander here. I know it's been a while since we've done one of these, but I'm back to bring you another Top 10 Commander video. This time we cover the top 10 mono red commanders. I'll be using stats from EDHREC.com, but giving you my take on the deck as usual. Before we get going, I want to remind you to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you know the second we release a new video. Oh, also, if you like this video, be sure to gently destroy that like button and share it with your friends on social media. With that out of the way, let's get into this list. Before we get into the top 10, I should give an honorable mention to the Laughless Dragon Queen. I think if you ask most people what comes to mind when you say magic, are dragons. They bring out this romanticized thought of medieval times. But this deck shows you what happens when the knight fails to slay the dragon. You get Drakuseth and Dragon Tempest kicking some serious butt, with Dragon Lord's Servant making those dragons cheaper and Dragon's Horde getting you card draw and mana fixing. Now onto what you all came here for, the list! Number 10, Bal Duke, Keeper of the Flame. Bal Duke is probably best described as a Voltron commander. You want to suit him up with as many auras and equipment as you can, but there's no need to attack with him since you'll be making so many 3/1 elemental tokens each turn that combat will look like you're playing a game of Risk. Which is great because this deck also includes impact tremors to take out multiple opponents at once. If you do feel so inclined, I guess you could attack with your commander, since you've probably suited him up with Embercleave, Hero's Blade, Black Blade Reforged, Rogue's Gloves, and Colossus Hammer. If you're looking for a decent budget commander to build and want to stay mono red, this is probably as good as it gets. I mentioned Embercleave earlier, and while it's a great card, it is a bit pricey and isn't necessary to make this deck good. There are tons of decent equipment and aura cards that fit in a budget build, so get brewing. Number 9, Zozu the Punisher. Zozu is a more down-to-earth commander. No, seriously, it's all about land. Not that kind of land, this kind of land. This deck gets most of its mana from the usual rocks like Thran Dynamo, Ruby Medallion, Dark Steel Ingot, Commander's Sphere, and Gilded Lotus. And then taps all of your opponent's lands with cards like War's Toll, blows up everyone's lands with cards like Ruination, Stoneshaker Shaman, and Mind Layer, or just punishes them for having land in the first place with cards like Price of Progress, Mana Barbs, and Ankh of Mishra. And just when your opponents think they're gonna die to Zozu triggers, you end by having over 20 artifacts with Hellkite Tyrant's ability. Sorry, I don't make the rules, I just follow all 237 pages of them. This deck literally punishes players for playing land. It's a symmetrical effect, so once Zozu is on the board, you won't be playing any, but you won't really need to. You have color fixing with the majority of your mana rocks, and your color requirements aren't really that significant. Sure, Zozu is double red, but by the time that matters, you've already got enough sources that you're covered. This deck really excels against landfall and anything that relies on non-basic land to get through a normal game. Number 8, Atali Primal Storm. One thing that Ixalan Block did really well was fill the void when it came to dinosaurs in Magic the Gathering. The biggest gap was in the number of legendary dinosaurs. Up until that time, there were no potential dino commanders. Now we have an abundance of choice, but only one that has Storm. In the name, I mean. Atali Primal Storm isn't quite what you think of when you think Storm, but this legendary dino gets there with a different kind of Storm. The main focus of this deck is to get extra combat steps or phases and to add a little bit of chaos into the game. The more combats you can take, the more cards you get to play from your opponent's libraries. You get free spells every combat, and your opponents will think twice about playing top or tutors. It's a win-win. The deck does this by playing cards like Relentless Assault, World at War, and Seize the Day to get the extra combats to double up on the trigger. Strionic Resonator means you exile 2 cards from each player's library and have that many more chances at hitting something awesome. Swiftfoot Boots, Lightning Greaves, and Otepec Huntmaster help give our commander haste, with the Huntmaster making it a little bit cheaper and helping cut back on the commander tax. Helm of the Host makes an appearance here, and well, obviously it's good. The more times you can get that trigger, the better. What's that? You want more chaos? Well, funny you should mention that because the deck also runs Stolen Strategy, probably my favorite card from Battle Bond. You may have to pay for the spells you exile, but it's essentially another Atali trigger, even if you haven't got your commander on the battlefield. I can't quite put my finger on why, but I really like this deck. Number 7, Feldon of the Third Path. Feldon is an artificer by trade, so it makes sense that he likes artifacts. I mean, like, a lot. He cares more about artifacts than about living creatures. Okay, I guess more like dead creatures, so maybe that wasn't the best comparison. Anyway, Feldon decks typically have a fair number of artifacts in them by default. But the main thing that Feldon decks care about are creatures, artifact or otherwise, that have enter the battlefield effects or dies triggers. Preferably both. This way you can take full advantage of his ability. What do I mean exactly? Well, cards like Mirror Battlesphere, Meteor Golem, Worm Coil Engine, and Combustible Gear Hulk. Being able to repeatedly have any of those enter the battlefield can be backbreaking for your opponent. Obviously, you want to include Duretti to fuel your plan. Having a way to discard high CMC creatures that you can bring back as artifact creature tokens for cheap is a great way to really speed up the game. If you want a fun alternate win con, then include Hellkite Tyrant. Given how many artifacts there are in this deck, I imagine it's the actual win con most of the time. Number 6, Torbram, Thane of Redfell. While researching this episode, Torbram was a constant thorn in my side. Not because he does extra damage, but because he seems to have been a hit amongst brewers since the release of Throne of Eldraine. He was originally sitting in the number 11 spot when I started and has since moved up, gaining over 100 decks built since. As I'm writing this, he's sitting with 444 decks on EDHREC.com, and I fully expect that to change between now and the time this video goes live. I get it, it's a fun commander to build around. It takes advantage of exactly what Red does best: deal direct damage to creatures and players. No fiddling with counterspells and combat tricks, just throw down enchantments and value creatures to burn your opponents to the ground. Enchantments like Pyrohemia, Sulfuric Vortex, Mana Barbs, Burning Earth, Circle of Flame, and Spell Shock will just suck the life out of your opponents like some kind of machine that sucks. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, including Harsh Mentor to discourage your opponents from using non-mana abilities, and Drakuseth Maw of Flame to just cut a swath on the board is just overkill, but they're here, so deal with it. Or don't. That's up to you. I'm not here to tell you how to play, just give you nightmares. And if that wasn't bad enough, this deck includes Planeswalkers. Planeswalkers in the form of Chandra Awakened Inferno. Number 5, Fross, God of the Forge. I want to make a joke about how Fross feels about creatures, but I just can't figure out if he loves them or hates them. Whatever the god's feelings are, this deck wants to do nothing but create a million little creatures to kill your opponents with the literal death by 1,000 cuts. This deck typically includes cards like Krenko Mob Boss for explosive damage. Mogg Infestation is the best board wipe for this deck. Temptive Vengeance can go either way. It can get you as many elementals as you can afford, and if your opponents want to get a little, they can, but it means you'll inch them ever closer to their demise. Most of the time with Perf out, they probably won't go for it, but you gotta hope, right? Either way, if you have Fross out and you can cast this for a ton of mana, you're bound to do some serious damage. Get it? See what I did there? Anyway, this deck also includes Panharmonicon to double up on the tokens, Impact Tremors to just really annoy your opponents, and Torbram to take all this damage production and turn it to 11. Oh, and you might as well throw Norn the Wary in the deck for the lols. Number 4, Neheb the Eternal. While our last commander was very token heavy, Neheb the Eternal is all about burning them to the ground however it can. Mostly with direct damage spells like Fall of the Titans, Jaya's Immolating Inferno, and Comet Storm. But this deck also uses Pyromancer's Goggles to double up on the fun. When this deck does manage to play a creature, you better believe that it follows that up with Chandra's Ignition to wipe the board and slap some faces. What creatures, you ask? Well, Torbram for one. How can you say no to free burn? And Heartless Hedetsugu is another great include to this deck. If you want to stick with a more Afflict type creature, you can bet that Cryptolith Fragment is in the deck to then flip into Aura of Emrakul for the Pseudo Afflict 3. Number 3, Zada Hedron Grinder. This one should be a no-brainer for anyone keeping track at home. Zada wants to go wide and then give everything all the stuff. You include cards like Krenko, Krenko's Command, and Twin Flame to make a metric buttload of goblins. Obviously, you include Young Pyromancer to make tons of elementals. Then you target Zada with cards like Expedite, Run Amok, Renegade Tactics, and Fist of Flame to draw a ton of cards and give everything haste, trample, and a massive boost. And then you just swing for the fences. Honestly, do you need any more of an explanation than that? I think you get it. Moving on. Number 2, Doretti Scrap Savant. There's no arguing that Mono Red loves its artifacts, and there's no better red artifact commander than Doretti Scrap Savant. I hope you're noticing a trend here. For the same reason that we had Nahiri the Lithomancer, Teferi Temporal Archmage, and Ghoul-Collar Gisa on their respective mono-colored lists, Doretti makes this one. Doretti just synergizes it with artifacts so well it's hard to ignore the power here. His plus ability helps to enable his minus ability, and his ultimate is just pure gas. So how does this deck take advantage of all that awesome? By playing all the artifacts. Artifact lands like Darksteel Citadel and Great Furnace. Artifact creatures like Steel Hellkite, Wormcoil Engine, Platinum Angel, Kuldotha Forgemaster, and the ever-terrifying Blightsteel Colossus. In a game where 10 infect damage can still kill you, having something with 11 power and trample that can't be killed is pretty scary. You know what's also scary? Spine of Ishsaw and Darksteel Forge. Making all your artifacts indestructible makes this a very strong strategy, but having cards that return to hand instead of going to the graveyard is also strong. And you may have noticed that we have lots of ways to sacrifice artifacts so we can repeat Spine over and over. Does this deck need a tutor? Most people would say all decks need them, so this deck includes Goblin Engineer to search up the right artifact at the right time and is another source of sacrifice. What else does this deck need? Win cons. Besides the usual turn creature sideways, there are a couple of fun ones. Scrap Mastery is an absolute bomb if you've got Doretti's ultimate online. Exile all the artifacts in your graveyard, then sacrifice all the artifacts on your board, and put the exiled cards back onto your board. Well, the ultimate brings all those sacrificed artifacts back as well. So you've just basically doubled your board presence and gotten rid of all your opponent's rampant equipment. Buy Soul Ring, and if you want a funny alternate win con, this deck includes Hellkite Tyrant to win out of nowhere. There is obviously some risk here since it has to survive, but I'm sure you're resourceful and can find a way to protect it with maybe another artifact? Number 1, Krenko Mob Boss. You probably saw this coming. This commander has more decks built on EDHREC.com than our number 2 and 3 commanders put together. Krenko is the ultimate goblin commander. The potentially explosive growth of goblins on your board and all the goblin lords and cost reducers makes this an extremely powerful and resilient deck to play. Goblin lords like Goblin Chieftain, Goblin War Chief, Door of Destinies, Coat of Arms, Icon of Ancestry, and Vanquisher's Banner. Goblin producers like Siege Gang Commander, Legion War Boss, Goblin Offensive, Pashalik Mons, Maga Infestation, and Krenko Tin Street Kingpin. Add in Fross God of the Forge and you can win a game just by tapping your commander. I don't think this needs any more explanation. Goblins, goblins, goblins. Well, that about does it for today. What did you think about these commanders? Are you thinking of building any of these decks after seeing this video? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video and you want to see more, you can help out the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. You can also hit the notification bell to make sure you stay up to date with all of our content. It helps the channel and it's completely free. If you wanted to throw a couple of bucks our way to help us improve the channel, you can do that through our Patreon at patreon.com/KitchenTableCommander or through our sponsor, Inked Gaming. Use the affiliate link in the description below to let them know we sent you, and you can use coupon code KitchenTable10 at checkout to get 10% off your purchase. You can even pick up the Kitchen Table Commander playmat while you're there. As usual, you can find me on Twitter at KitchenTableCMD and on both Instagram and Twitch at KitchenTableCommander. Streaming Tuesdays at 7 p.m. and Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'll leave links in the description to all our socials. It's been a blast, and I'll see you in the next video.